hardworking Americans, veterans have been severely impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. Countless veterans have lost jobs, closed businesses, homeschooled their own children, and faced uncertain prospects while our nation grappled with the pandemic. And like the rest of the country, many veterans were directly affected by the deadly virus. We have more than 230,000 veterans in our care infected by it, and sadly, 10,605 dying from the disease. At the VA, we've risen to the challenge of combating this deadly pandemic. Our integrated healthcare system, the largest in the nation, has been running nonstop since the start of the pandemic to provide much needed care to infected veterans and vaccines to those most at risk. To date, more than 1.4 million veterans have been vaccinated, with more than half of them having gotten both vaccines. And we're making sure that equity is at the forefront of where and how we distribute vaccines. At the same time, we continue to deliver routine care while mitigating the spread of infection. VA is leading the country in standardizing the use of telehealth for routine doctor visits. We're partnering with community and service organizations so that vets do not forego checkups because of broadband limitations. Last year, for example, in March, VA averaged approximately 2,500 telehealth visits a day. Last month, February, we averaged nearly 45,000 such visits a day. As you can see, this is a major increase, and we need the funding in the ARP to sustain this op-tempo for our veterans so we can continue to push through the pandemic. Lastly, before getting into a little bit more detail on the health situation, the Veterans Benefits Administration continues to help veterans cope with the economic impact of the pandemic, from helping veterans avoid eviction and foreclosure to making sure that veterans can continue to rely on their GI Bill to pay for tuition. We make sure that VA can continue to adapt to these challenging times, and the President's American Rescue Plan will do just that. It will provide $17 billion in additional funding to VA, to include at least $13.5 billion to improve our ability to provide medical service to veterans affected by COVID, $272 million to cut through the backlog of disability claims, and help us manage the compensation exams that have access to which have worsened as a result of the pandemic, and $386 million to develop a rapid retraining program for veterans unemployed as a result of the pandemic. Now, let me just give you one other figure for you to consider. Since the start of the pandemic, 19 million appointments have been changed, canceled, or deferred as a result of the pandemic. 19 million. What we believe is, obviously we've been able to compensate for those through the telehealth platform, but not for all of them. And as a result of deferred care, which we're actually seeing across the healthcare system, not just in VA, we're gonna see increased cost. And the ARP is critical to our ability to make sure that we can keep up with those demands of the increased cost. So our department remains fully committed, obviously, to fulfilling the sacred obligation that President Biden has made clear we have to those who serve in uniform. The rescue plan helps us deliver on that promise, especially in this unanticipated and significant time of crisis. We urge the Senate to pass the much-needed plan as soon as possible, and I thank you again, Jen, for the opportunity to be here with you.
All right, go ahead, Jen.
Secretary, can you explain how veterans should go about looking as to where to sign up for vaccination? Should they be going to the VA or should they be going to their states and localities? It's certainly been one of the trickiest parts of the vaccination process to figure out information on that.
Yeah, so I want to start by telling I think what is a very positive story. Oftentimes you don't, at least we've not in the past been focused on good news stories about our scheduling process. Our scheduling process is actually working pretty well. And so the first answer, Jeff, is those veterans in our care, currently in the 75 and older and 65 and older, who are our particular focus at the moment, should be hearing from our schedulers. And our schedulers are in contact with them. And if you just take an example of the VA here in DC, they're moving through on some days, something like 80 veterans vaccinated in an hour. Now, that's obviously because of the vaccinators, it's because of the pharmacists, it's because of the nurses, but it's also because of the schedulers. And they're doing an amazing bit of work. So the first thing is they should be hearing from our schedulers. The second thing is we have a bunch of information on our website at va.gov, including how to get access to opportunities. And then we're working also with VSO partners and directly with veterans through even my office, whom we're hearing from, to make sure that they have the most recent information. Are there examples of frustrations? Absolutely. But we're staying obviously on top of this, Jeff, trying to be as transparent as possible. And in the first instance, reaching veterans directly to schedule them.
Are there examples of overlap too, where veterans are maybe going to the VA, but also hearing from their local, or going to their state or local facilities as well?
Definitely. And many of our veterans are obviously, this is the beauty of the integrated system, which is we provide care across the range of services. And so many of our, the over 6 million vets who are with us, rely on us for care across the board, are very sophisticated consumers of care. But then we have up to 9 million who are enrolled in the VA system, and they have choices, and we're seeing them make choices. But again, we are trying to be as affirmative and on the front foot as we can be, so that we're providing that kind of information.
I'm getting at, and sorry to ask one more, isn't there some inefficiency there that would be a problem? Like if veterans just knew we can get our shots from the VA, that will clear space at these other facilities for other people, and it would ideally give them priority at the VA.
Yeah, I guess my answer isn't that there's not overlap and that there's not competition. There obviously is. But I think what we are seeing, Jeff, is that we are very efficiently moving veterans who qualify through the system, and we're hearing very positive feedback on that. There inevitably is going to be some overlap, and that's what we're trying to get ahead of with forward contacting and also providing information as clearly as we can about dates and times for vaccinations, how those clinics are going to function, but also not have it just be a jump ball, actually have it be scheduled so we can efficiently get vets through the system.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Can you talk about what the biggest challenges are in getting as many veterans vaccinated as possible? And secondly, is a part of that hesitancy at all? Because I know Pentagon officials have said about a third of troops have not opted to get the vaccine.
Yeah.
So what are the challenges, and does that include hesitancy?
Well, the biggest challenge is supply, and that's why we really need the American Rescue Plan. You've heard the president say this, you've heard Jeff Zients say this, you've heard Jen say this. We have more demand right now than there is supply, and that's notwithstanding the fact that the COVID coordinator, the president, have really cranked up supply week on week, including with these several innovative actions even over the last several days with Johnson & Johnson and enhancing the manufacturing capacity. So the big challenge for us is supply. From what I hear from our docs is from the moment we get it, our allotments are in arms within 2 to 3 days. Okay, so I think that's a pretty remarkable throughput. Now on hesitancy, our lead doc on this testified last week to Congress that, in fact, we're surprised that hesitancy is less than we feared. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to confront it, but right now, we're seeing significant demand, that demand outstripping supply, and that demand consistent across categories. In fact, our performance among Black vets, Latino vets, and white vets is pretty consistent, if not outperforming in Black and Latino vets, white vets uptake. Nevertheless, this is going to be a problem going forward, so we're working very closely with our VSOs, very closely with Congress, and then very closely to tell the story of the more than 1.4 million vets who have gotten vaccinated to date. We're talking about what that experience has been, which is overwhelmingly positive. But we need the funding from ARP to get this done.
follow on the supply. Is there a set amount that you're getting every week from the administration, and have you asked Jeff Zients to increase that?
There is a process, well-established process, that's run through the interagency. So we get our allotment every week out of that process. We then channel it out to what we call our VISNs, which are our regional setups across the country, based on their population of the target populations. So we have a very straightforward, transparent process by which we get our allotment and dish it out. Now, I think the question over time is, we're trying to demonstrate at VA that we're very efficient at moving it through, in the hopes that as there's extra, that it comes our way. So for example, about 3 weeks ago, there's 200,000 doses. That was additive to our allotment. And we, as with everything else we're getting, we move that quickly through the system into vets' arms on a very clear, efficient process.
On another topic, as the Capitol's on alert today, I wanted to ask you about the veterans who played a role in the January 6th attack. We've seen 30+ veterans be arrested for participating. We see these militia groups that are actively trying to recruit veterans. What, if anything, can the VA do? Are you considering doing to try and combat some of this?
Yeah, so I also, just to fill out the story, I also saw veterans on that day, including members of Congress who were veterans doing remarkable things, including members of the DCPD and the Capitol PD, veterans doing remarkable things. And so I think it's a full picture there that underscores that basically veterans continue to play a critical role in the country even after they retire from active duty, and we're very proud of that. As to the questions you raise, we'll take a look at that. We don't have anything specific to announce now, but again, I want to make sure that we have a full picture of things like remarkable members in the House. Mr. Gallego is one who comes to mind. Senator Cotton in the Senate. These people taking concrete action in support of democracy on the ground that day, they're vets too.
Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Two, if you don't mind. The first one, COVID related. You talked about missed deployments and kind of what COVID has taken away. When it comes to suicide, what is the VA doing right now tangibly to reach out to veterans proactively? Not just messaging campaigns, though I know those are important, but to proactively reach out to veterans to ensure that needs in that general area are being met.
Yeah, it's a major priority for obvious reasons, and it's heartbreaking. Any individual suicide is absolutely heartbreaking, and we're very focused on reducing these. The most important set of lessons I think we have to draw from is the availability of telehealth platform. Demand for mental health services is up. I think that's a good sign because it speaks to the fact that stigma is being reduced. However, there's still too much, and that is part of, that's the first half of the answer to your question, which is we're not just passive waiting for vets to come to us. We're also then working with our providers and with local communities to ensure that we have a good sense of at-risk vets and that we're establishing contact and ways to be in contact with them affirmatively. Lastly, Congress has given us additional authorities on this, and we're going to use them. The Hannon Act was just enacted. In fact, I was just speaking with Senator Bozeman from Arkansas about this earlier this week. He and Senator Tester spent a lot of time on this question, giving us new authority to make grants in local communities using local providers who know their communities best to ensure that we're providing assistance to those vets, at-risk vets, and making sure that we're doing things like reducing the stigma. So that's what we're doing, Phil.
And just real quick, from a policy question, I know this came up during your confirmation hearing, but do you have a plan right now to either reverse or significantly revise the community access standards through the VA Mission Act?
I don't have a specific plan on that. I'm very in active discussion with people like Senator Moran, Senator Tester, Senator Sanders about what we're seeing. We're also beginning to get data about last fiscal year, what happened in the community. This is the data we're getting now is pre-COVID. So basically first quarter and a half of FY20. And what we're seeing there is a pretty significant uptake in the community. And so we got to, A, be a good partner with that, ensure that we're paying those bills on time to local providers. We're keeping vibrant networks so our people have places that they can find care. But we also have to be really careful that we're also maintaining investment in the integrated system of the VA itself. We have to recapitalize that and make sure that these institutions, many of them over 50 years old, are brought up to speed. The ARP will be important to that too. Things like new HVAC, new air control systems, zero pressure rooms, so we're not moving that virus through the hospital. Those are all things that are going to be enabled by the ARP, and that's why we really need the Senate to get this done.
All right, let's do the last question. Then we'll have to come back. Go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, at the top of your remarks, you mentioned the importance of keeping veterans in their homes. The moratorium on forbearance and foreclosures, of course, was extended through June.
Yes.
Do you think it should be extended further?
Well, we'll take a look at that, and we're taking a look at a lot of those things. Incidentally and importantly, in the ARP is additional funding for homelessness programming. We know that this continues to bedevil us as a country. It's an outrage any night that any vet is homeless. We're, over the last 10 years, down 50% on those numbers, but they're creeping back up as a result of the pandemic. And 50%, while progress, is nowhere near where we need to be. So we need that funding in the ARP.
Thank you so much, Secretary Konst.
Thank
You
you.
have to come back.
Yes, thank you very much. It's great to see everybody.
All right, a couple of other things at the top. As you all saw, many of you reported on this morning, the numbers from the Labor Department out show the 50th week in a row with new unemployment claims where new unemployment claims.
Hello, and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst. What to say about Governor Andrew Cuomo? Nothing with this guy is ever simple. He has raised to new heights the skill of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Just think about the past year. In the pandemic panic a year ago, as the world seemed to be collapsing around us, he became the Democratic darling, the anti-Trump, who spoke truth to everyone, who would watch his briefings on YouTube. He made you feel warm and fuzzy, in control of chaos. And he put facts above politics. And to make sure we got the point, he even wrote a book to explain this to us, all in the last year. But while all of this was happening on screen, off screen, Governor Cuomo was laying the roots of his own undoing. It's what the Cuomos do, Cuomos. Starting with the nursing homes. There are plenty of ways to defend the decision to send COVID-19 patients back into nursing homes at the peak of the pandemic last March. Even if we look back and say, ouch, that was a bad decision, it may well have been understandable under the circumstances when hospital beds were so vital and the forecasts were so dire. But Andrew Cuomo definitely took an arguable decision and turned it into a scandal by playing fast and loose with the facts, those same precious facts he was showing his reverence for on YouTube every day. How many nursing home residents died from COVID-19? It turns out the Cuomo answer was based on whether they died at the nursing home. If they were rushed to a hospital and then died, they were not counted as nursing home deaths. This is classic Cuomo, passed down from Father Mario to son Andrew. There is no truth that can't be bent to be more favorable by rewording it or redefining it. Andrew's father, Mario Cuomo, was famously argumentative and was well known for writing soaring speeches to distract from his political dilemmas. One of Mario Cuomo's best friends once said of him that if words were birds, he'd be covered in shit. Seriously, what are friends for to say things like that about you? Andrew, alternatively, has actually never been as good at words as his father. But his father, rest his soul, would have been proud of his son for working out a political problem by rewording it poetically. You say deaths of New York's nursing home residents are frighteningly high? No worries. We just redefine nursing home deaths to bring them down. In Cuomo land, this is creativity. Of course, in the real world, it looked a lot like a cover-up. A tragic, horrifying, ruthless, grotesque cover-up. And while this was all unraveling, the governor told a Queens Assembly member, Ron Kim, he would destroy him for questioning his handling of the nursing home data and the investigations. Destroy him. Now, the number of New Yorkers the Cuomos have threatened to destroy is legion. Most of us have survived. But cover-up combined with bullying was not a good look. Not look, luck. And then there was Lindsay Boylan. She used to work in Andrew Cuomo's administration and described the experience as an ongoing series of micro and not so micro sexual aggressions. While Cuomo said her claims were false, most everyone assumed they are true. But her use of them to draw attention as she runs for Manhattan Borough president blunted their impact. Okay, until two other women stepped forward with similar stories. And the New York Post, which never seemed to work up, about Trump's sexual misconducts, ran a photo on the front page of Andrew Cuomo cupping the face of one of these women in his tender hands as he asked to kiss her. Cuomo finally said he was sorry, sort of. It wasn't completely clear if he was sorry for mistreating these women or sorry that they didn't understand that his mistreatment was unintentional and he was sort of unaware of the hurt he was having on women. As Boylan said, how was he supposed to look after the people of his state in this pandemic when he claims not to even be aware of his impact on women in his office? Cuomo says he will not resign. I believe this. Cuomos are a lot of things, but quitters, they are not. He will fight and fight and fight to the last word. That is the Cuomo way. If only the fight were better focused on the real needs of the state instead of the image and ego of the governor. He's been through this before. We're going to talk about that with one of our first guests today. His inner circle is now serving time in prison, but most people aren't even aware of that. This is how he has been able to reinvent himself over and over and distance himself from several scandals. Not one, not two, but many. And we're going to talk about that on today's show. Our first guest, when we come back, knows a lot about Andrew Cuomo. He is himself an heir to a family dynasty of great writing in New York. Harry Siegel is going to be joining us, one of our great friends. And we're going to get the lowdown from the one and only Assembly member, Ron Kim. We will find out how Cuomo's threat to destroy him is working out for him and for Andrew Cuomo. But later on, we'll have our great panel, as usual. Arun Chaudhary is going to join us with Rabb. We're going to talk about the politics of this whole. It is a Cuomo day. Get ready for it. You've been waiting. You've been asking. I've been scared to do it. But I think Andrew Cuomo's a little bit distracted with other things right now. So we will be right back with the one and only Harry Siegel. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I'm so excited. Our dear friend Harry Siegel, he's an editor for the Daily Beast. He's a columnist for the New York Daily News, and he's the co-host of FAQ NYC. It's a great podcast on New York City politics. I don't know how he has time to do all this stuff, but and read all those books behind him. Do you ever sit there and think, like, how do all these writers, how do all these journalists, they don't read these books that they're getting? Harry, you're on a mute, just as a heads up.
So the Daily Beast gets review books. I'm naturally a hoarder, so the combination has not been so healthy.
I get books too, and we have this thing. We have a book club now, which was a crazy idea for me because it just gives people more work to do. But we're doing. You get a choice of 1 book a month, 2 books, or 4 books a month, and so it's now forcing me to read 4 books a month. Which is bye-bye social life. All right, Harry, so much to discuss. This is our Cuomo show. People have been asking for it. I've been reluctant to do it. basically because I'm scared of him at this point in my life. But I wanted to talk with you more about it because Andrew Cuomo, I think folks, a lot of progressives and maybe even some liberals are starting to understand that Andrew Cuomo is not who he put himself out to be in the mainstream, or at least during the COVID press conferences. But I want to talk with you a little bit more about the Andrew Cuomo before the pandemic. A lot of years there. But let's just start off with, is this Andrew Cuomo's first scandal?
It's his first scandal involving harassing much younger women. Absolutely. In every other set of terms, absolutely not. There's such a laundry list since he was governor, and actually before. Look, Andrew Cuomo is not a great guy. Nobody thinks he's a great guy, but he's been a very powerful guy. And so it's been hard for people to step up and say this at a lot of points. Something he did when he was running for governor last time to match his father's third term is he was running in the primary against Cynthia Nixon. And pretty late in the primary, Cuomo was clearly going to win, was going to win by a lot. They put out this mailer that effectively said Cynthia Nixon is an anti-Semite. Right. Now, there's lots of things in life that are subject to interpretation. But we'll start here, and then we'll get to Andrew Cuomo's apologies and attempts to interpret the allegations against him. But there was nothing ambiguous about this. I wasn't a huge Cynthia Nixon fan for other reasons, but this was just and
this was a Democratic Party flyer, just to be clear. It didn't come from Andrew Cuomo himself. It came from the state party.
It came from Andrew Cuomo himself. I'm going to come right to it was a disgusting flyer. It was just an absolute lie, smearing his opponent for extremely marginal gain in a contest that he'd already won and won handily. And that's the sort of thing that Andrew Cuomo does. And then he says, that wasn't me. Oh, it was my Democratic Party. It was 3 of my closest aides, but I knew nothing about that. Those are just things that a person who does not think that the rules they set apply to themselves. And that is always the story with Andrew Cuomo. That's the story with JCOPE, the state ethics board that Andrew Cuomo controls, that at various points has tried to look into major lapses with Andrew Cuomo's ethics and has got nowhere with those things. And it's how you end up saying, I passed the nation's strongest harassment laws and founding the Women's Equality Party. Oh, God. Onion headline.
Like the laundry list, guys.
Yeah.
Because of last time, because when he ran, when Zephyr Teachout ran against him, and she received the WFP line, and he was like, "Oh, I'll come up with 2 things at once: the WEP line, the Women's Equality Party, and it's also a women's group, and I'll get a bunch of institutional women to support me." Just as a little bit of recap for folks. But go ahead.
So this is the guy who does those things, and then is talking to 25-year-old staffers. About are you interested in sleeping with older men? I'm interested in sleeping with younger women. Here's where I think you should get that tattoo. And now, by the way, when he says we have to wait for an investigation, understand this, he's not denying any of that woman, Charlotte Bennett's allegations at all. He's trying to spin them and say, if anyone misinterpreted the things I said or thought of this as unintentional flirtation, I'm so sorry. How else do you expect someone to take a sad, older, newly single man, sort of creeping up on you and saying, hey, let's talk about your sex life? And then at another point, she says she brought up that she was going to give a talk to college students about a sexual assault that she'd survived. And he does I know this Andrew Cuomo thing, the looks her right in the eyes and just sort of holds it and then talks to her about it, but in this strange and disturbing way, and just sort of keeps repeating the words, you were assaulted, you were raped, and just staring at her. And she said, to me, this was this turning point in the relationship. I think this is important to mention because the sum of the allegations on certain sets of terms don't amount to that much. You have 3 women have come out now, and the most physical thing you have is a kiss, which Cuomo emphatically denies because his legal line.
Of an aide.
Yes, of an
Important
aide.
To,
of an aide who's alone in an office with him and who's not looking to be kissed, which is totally unacceptable. But you could say, what is this? It's a kiss. Or, I've seen people on Twitter and elsewhere, are we going to ban looking at people and stuff like that? But this is, again, the most powerful man in the state doing this to people who work for him. who are not whatsoever interested in this attention and leaking. And again, not Cuomo, but the Democratic Party or people want to help him. Come on, Cuomo leaking this first woman who bravely comes out, Lindsey Boylan, her personnel files and being like, everyone knows what a crazy she was. I mean, come on. And all that sort of stuff is very
there
nasty.
is like the historic context of that in terms of sexism, calling somebody crazy. But what I find interesting is there had been complaints made. I mean, these women came forward with documentation. The second one, she went to her superior and said, I felt uncomfortable about this. I mean, it wasn't necessarily like it wasn't going to take down the governor, but there's a paper trail on this stuff.
Right. And he's cornered by that paper trail. So this isn't the biggest sin ever, but he can't really deny all this. Interestingly enough, I was told that as of January, people who were leaving, or early this year, people who were leaving the executive branch when they were leaving, like people who work there, were getting asked, like, do you have anything you want to complain about or report? Because we have a process for that. And I don't know if they'd always done that, but it seemed notable and I think new and not something you generally get in exit interviews. So I am curious how many more shoes there might be to drop here. But in any case, this is just indefensible, and Cuomo isn't really even trying to defend it. He just wants to show up and say something that has the word apology in it, and then that's the headline the next day, and then move on. And look, you have to do a budget with me, and there's $100 billion here, and I hold most of the cards, right. Legislators. What are you going to do? I win again. And unless another shoe drops, and pending what comes out in this Tish James report, that'll be months and months.
Attorney General. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's unclear what brings him down. But again, there isn't actually all that much to investigate because at least with Charlotte Bennett, there's nothing that Cuomo is actually denying. He's just saying he's a poor old guy and his friends are his work friends, and maybe he doesn't get how the world's changed and he's misunderstood. And it's dishonest and it's gross and it's repulsive to me.
There were so many women, homosexuals out there that were willing to date him, and he had to go for a staffer. No, but I mean, aside from that, I'm not making light to it, but it's disturbing. So let's talk about some of the scandals from pre 2020. I mean, I alluded to this in my opening that Governor Cuomo's inner circle had been investigated. One is sitting in jail right now. Around this Buffalo Billions scandal. Can you kind of give folks a little bit of, I mean, it seems so far away, but it's really not.
Okay.
So, like, this would take down a governor. Anybody else, they would have gone down for this.
Joe Percoco, who is Cuomo's right-hand guy, was sentenced eventually to 6 years in prison for this. It involves Elon Musk, the Flim Flam monorail man who was going to revive the upstate economy and got lots and lots of benefits and didn't do any of this. There was a Preet Bharara investigation, and depending on which rumor mill you want to go down, either Preet wanted nothing more than to take down Andrew Cuomo, but was just unable to at the end because of very minute letter of the law issues. Again, so it wasn't me. It was just the people closest to me and the honorary, additional Cuomo brother who did it. But I had no idea, or Joe Biden actually pressured Preet to not do so. I have no idea. I'm just repeating rumors in a public setting here. In any case, Joe Percoco, who's been basically a lifelong friend and colleague of Andrew's and of Mario's, when Andrew is advising Mario as a teenager living in Albany and in this cesspool and past the Bear Mountain Compact, where what happens once you drive past Bear Mountain just stays there and frequently involves interns in pornography is between New York and Albany. So as you drive up, that's what's happening. So this is the sort of thing that one would expect to bring a governor down and have some consequences. Alex Perrine had a very smart piece, I thought, in the New Republic, where he said, look, the problem is there's two Cuomos. There's newspaper Cuomo, who's got a super complicated backstory, and you got to get every issue and track it. And there's Percoco, and there's the Preet Pro, and here are the people in his inner circle, and here's what's happening. And you remember this thing from 15 years ago. And then there's TV Cuomo, who's like a man who does stuff in a jacket, who shows up, who's competent, who's sort of fatherly, and in the midst of the pandemic, was on TV, sounding very much not like Trump, like a competent, more or less decent person, and fatherly, very purposefully, like, here are my daughters, let me tell you about them, and also their boyfriends, and share little family stories, but here are the facts you need, and I'm the person respecting the science and giving you the facts, which all comes out differently when you realize that as he's doing that show and performance, that he is trying to sleep with women the age of his daughters, one of whom is trying to get him to go away by noting, hey, I played soccer in junior high school with your daughter, right? And it's not saying this as a flirtatious thing. It's saying this is a, what are you doing, old man thing. And you know, old man just keeps right on going. It's really,
It's disturbing.
Yeah.
So,
It is.
okay, one more thing that I want to touch on, just for folks to see. You know, this is like a brief illustration of the mind and creativity and delusion of Governor Cuomo. And I say creativity because he has this way of rebounding and speaking to the cameras and twisting words and all, changing the facts on nursing home deaths, but which we'll get to later. But the IDC, it seems, it was such a big thing that, like, the fact that we have to remind people what it was. Can you just talk about, like, how the IDC formed and why and what it was?
I'm going to try to get through that and one other thing in one very deep breath. So
Okay.
we had independent Democrats who split from the Democratic Party to give the Republican Party effective control of the state Senate. So in an overwhelmingly Democratic state, the legislature was still split and Cuomo could be the indispensable middleman. Part of what ended this arrangement was the leader of the IDC, Jeff Klein, went outside of a bar and tried to kiss one of his aides who was not interested in being kissed. Erica Vladimir came out and expressed this, and this helped cause Klein to lose his seat, helped draw more attention to what was so ugly about the IDC in a different and maybe more dramatic set of terms, and that balance sort of collapsed, and Democrats retook control. Right about the same time this was happening, and that arrangement was finally breaking down, which had been very important to Cuomo, Bob Freeman, right? We're back to newspaper Cuomo now and into the weeds, but I think these are important weeds, and they actually get us to the nursing home deaths and sort of covering up public information. Bob Freeman is the powerful state official who basically advises on and has some real control over open records requests. So things that are nominally public, but you can't get to as a reporter without this guy's help. And this guy had a thing where if you were a woman and you wanted his help, he was going to stare at your chest. He was going to touch you. He was going to be creepy around you. And you had to just sort of tolerate this if you wanted to do your job and go back to your editors and say, I got the story, for a long time. And so that dam finally broke, and a number of women came out and reported this, wrote about it. He was pushed out. And this, to me, is the intersection of the nursing home scandal that is orders of magnitude larger in certain ways, and the harassment scandal that no way trying to say is itself a small thing, but to me is the connective tissue that the powerful state official in charge of making sure that things that are supposed to be public and that we have access to can be seen was using that power to sexually harass women and more or less extort them for their attention. And I think that there's a nexus there in which people abuse power one way, abuse power in other ways, and you can see the strands coming together.
So fascinating. Harry, I don't think this is a topic that's going away anytime soon, but before we wrap, just real quick, what do you think if there's more information that comes out, more, allegations, how do you think this is going to play out?
I'm not even smart about the past. I know nothing about the future. The one thing I'm confident about is if no more shoes drop, Cuomo is not going to see himself out. And if more shoes drop, he really has no interest in seeing himself out. And there's no sign yet that the legislature, at least, is willing to push him out, that the business community and the people who have sponsored his campaigns and allowed him to be in the dominant position he's in are ready to push him out. So I think we have reached a point where people don't self-regulate with shame because they don't have to. And if you do, you don't do these things in the first place with young women, but you say, oh, wow, this could destroy my career and everything I've worked for. So that part went away, and it went away for a reason. And it seems much more likely to me that he blows through all this. You have to do a budget with him. He's still the governor. People still stand up when he's in the room. And people with longer memory say, do you remember that thing from 2021? You know, next year as he's running. I really hope that's wrong, but that's my sense at the moment.
Truly fascinating. I think what you're saying about shame is spot on. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. How if they just push through some of these powerful lawmakers, it doesn't stick. Obviously, the state of media doesn't help either. But I'm baffled by how many people came forward and said, "This is not new about Andrew Cuomo."
Ron Kim,
Ron Kim, who's up next? Yes.
Yeah, on The View, right, for one day, Cuomo is on TV every day. He left TV for like a week to hide as these allegations came out and just, have statements put out in his name and test how those went. But like, he as long as he stays in power, he gets the last word. If he was to show shame and to walk away, other people would have the last word. And I think that's the one thing he can't accept, unfortunately.
Well said. Harry Siegel, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope to have you back on soon. We can talk more about the latest because there's a lot.
Oh boy.
Good summary. All right, everybody, right back after this break, we'll have Assembly member Ron Kim joining us to give us his version of the story. Stick around. We'll be right back.
I'm going to run back to work, but I'm going to watch Kim. Bye.
Thanks, Harry. All right, everyone, we're dealing with a different type of show today, just so everybody knows. The music is not going to be running. Don't worry. We're having a little bit of a production switch up today. So that is what's going on.
Hello.
Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I am so excited to have our friend, Assemblymember Ron Kim, join us today. He represents the 40th Assembly District in Queens. He is the first and only Korean American ever elected to the New York State Legislature. He campaigned for Bernie Sanders, of course, in 2020. And my fellow Queens person, I don't know what we call Queensite. How's that?
Oh, it's good to see you, Nomiki. It's been a while. How are you?
I'm doing well, given the circumstances. How are you, more importantly? Tell us, any threats lately?
No, not as of yet. Thank goodness. Those few days were very much terrorizing for our family, as you can imagine, getting that kind of harassment, not just one phone call, but the subsequent many attempts by the governor and his staff were it was very intimidating for our family for a few days.
So let's just go back a little bit for folks to understand. I mean, this is all because you stood up about the nursing home deaths, which have affected so many New Yorkers and notable New Yorkers too, who've spoken up. But tell us a little bit about what you did and why he reacted that way.
Yeah, so it all culminated in that phone call because, because he more or less, it wasn't about him just trying to bully me or anything like that, as it's being recently reported, but more so about the length that the governor will go to use his position of power to implicate me and other lawmakers in the cover up of his corruption, which is that they purposely hid life and death information about nursing home residents. And this is such an important point because, Nomiki, as you know, our policies are driven by data and truthful information. And if we had real-time data, we could have legislated differently. We could have intervened and offer better solutions. But he took that away from us. And I called him out on it because his top aide admitted in a private meeting that was the case. And in the moment I called him out, he wanted me to issue, as he called, to make threats and order me to issue a statement to counter what I had said and to support his narrative that it wasn't a cover-up, that it was about them complying with the federal government first, and then they were going to come get back to us. So he essentially wanted me to lie. And once he crossed that line, I had to come forward. I had to tell the truth. because it wasn't about me. It was about, the 15,000 families who died and the hundreds and, families that I worked directly with, the promises that I made that I would seek the truth and find justice for them. And I wasn't going to cover up for this executive.
You mentioned this meeting with Melissa DeRosa, who's his aide. Can you describe what that, it's been reported on, but that was sort of the moment this broke apart, right?
Yeah. So, we had an oversight hearing last August. I was part of the health committee then, and since then I've been appointed as the chair of the Asian committee. We asked for a number of things in writing because they couldn't answer anything in that oversight hearing. They were supposed to get back to us in a few days. That few days took them 7 months. And that was that meeting. It was after an attorney general's report, number of lawsuits. They wanted to come clean with the data. So they set this meeting up. It was a 2-hour meeting with myself and 5 other chairs. And I actually, no one knows this, but I actually asked for a private meeting, meaning no virtual, no Zoom, because I kind of wanted to protect it myself. I don't want others to listen in to a private conversation. I wanted to be forthright and honest.
With Melissa or with the governor?
It was with Melissa and the Howard Zucker, who's the commissioner of the Department of Health, and 2 other of his top executive staff members in charge of the COVID response. And they denied their request. They purposely said, no, it has to be done through Zoom, which is now it kind of makes sense because they never told us they recorded that virtual Zoom call. So in the middle of the conversation, as we were grilling, why didn't you tell us the information early on? Your answers are BS. All the other chairs were just livid. Like we waited for 7 months, our constituents are angry, etc. And then all of a sudden, Melissa has what I vividly recall, a Feel Good Man moment, in that movie with Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise. It's like, you can't handle the truth. Like, and Melissa literally said, you want the truth, this is it. And then she just told us. And
wow,
we weren't next to each other, the chairs, right? But we texted, did she just admit to obstructing justice? Because she just said we were frozen. We had a Department of Justice investigation, and Donald Trump is tweeting left and right. So we didn't know what to do. We just didn't want that information to get out because we don't know how it was going to be used against us. I mean, the moment she said it, I'm like, did I hear that right? So I went back to my staff to confirm. But one by one, it just kind of disappeared because this was a serious moment, right? It was a moment of integrity and ethics, and we're all combined into one. Because I made a judgment, that conversation no longer became a private conversation. The moment she said that, she implicated all of it, not just me, the Senate, the Assembly, our institutions are now implicated to the cover-up. So I thought it through, and I decided to comment when the reporter came to me about, what do you think about what she said? And I gave her my impression of what she said. Immediately, I realized when the article was going to hit, it was not about my comment, but they already had the whole story. So I actually felt very sympathetic to Melissa in that moment, because it shouldn't be her. It should be the governor who should be held accountable. And she's still, after all, an appointed staff member. So I made an effort to actually retract my statement by myself, because the article was going to run, and I didn't want to add fuel to that fire. It was going to be a big story regardless. It was too late. The article came, and then an hour later, the governor calls me while I'm trying to bathe my kids, just berating, yelling, just very intimidating tone, ultimately trying to order me to issue a statement to counter what I heard.
And I mean, what's so odd about that, not that he was arguing and calling to berate, because that's, as we've discussed on the show, it's the norm. What is so odd is that he thought he could actually sway you. I mean, you're no loyal Cuomo disciple, whatever. You're an independent guy, progressive. You support Bernie Sanders, as we noted. Why do you think he thought he could get away with that? Was there some sort of ultimatum? Was there something attached to this?
Yeah,
or was he losing his mind, frankly?
I think he knew what was happening. I think he was trying to avoid further, probes and investigations. I think we were at the heart of the truth. And before that, and people don't understand what was happening in the background. My couple of us lawmakers and I, and especially me, like I started to have a platform around his corporate legal immunity that he give. So I started to call him out actively, and they were getting very, not annoyed, and they were starting to respond in a very negative way already to that. And so we were at the heart of the truth of why they covered it up. I don't think it was Trump. I think they took direction to purposely delink information, to suppress information away from the public and away from us. And I believe, and I don't know unless I can't confirm unless there's a formal probe. Part of the reason was take away our right to repeal the corporate immunity that he gave to his top executives at the peak of the pandemic. And I think the more we were getting closer to that truth, the more he wanted to shut me up. So I think that phone call was twofold. One was the Hail Mary pass to try to avoid a further probe. If I discredit myself, say I didn't hear that right, perhaps there wouldn't be another federal investigation. And secondly, to discredit me, to neutralize my voice. And once I take a statement back, now I am discredited as a lawmaker, and no one will believe what I have to say about his administration. So I think, looking back, I think that's why he was so forceful and picked up the phone. First time ever, 8 years. He never called me for anything. I met him at events. I even had dinner with him, with other lawmakers a couple of times, but never called me. And he's pretty disciplined about that. He orders others to enforce and be abusive, not him. But for him to pick up that phone, I honestly think he knew what was going to happen to him, and he was trying desperately to cover up the truth.
Yeah, it seems like desperation. Since that occurred, how your colleagues, I mean, it's been interesting to see the statements coming from leadership. Have you ever seen anything like this happen, a response to the governor from Senate leadership, Assembly leadership, other colleagues of yours, of course, Tish James, the Attorney General? What's your take on what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, institutionally, we definitely moved significantly in the last 2 weeks. It was my incident, but obviously the sexual harassment charges came one after another. So from where we were 2 weeks ago, which was, let's just create some sort of a commission, to which the governor signed off on. He can appoint people on the commission.
He loves commissions.
Right. To
that
check
he can shut
his
down
powers. Right.
as soon as
they
pry
it. Yeah. So that was like how they started to where we are now, which will be voting on a bill to fully repeal his ability to issue any mandates, and any kind of new mandates will be vetted by us, and we get to determine when this pandemic ends, not him. So we completely neutralized him with this new legislation we're pushing forward, which is a big leap from where we were 2 weeks ago. We also have so many new progressive women lawmakers that are taking a stand and saying to leadership, this can't go on. We have to respond to the sexual harassment charges as institutions. We can't stay silent. We need to put forward real legislation to signal to not just to the public, to the female workers that work in our institutions, that this type of abusive behavior won't be tolerated in Albany anymore. So that's where we are now, trying to figure out, okay, what is the appropriate response to all these scandals? But as you know, we have 107 Democrats. So one piece of solution takes about 3 days of debating and going back and forth. But I'm confident we'll get there one solution at a time.
It's interesting because, this is a state that around 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, where the institutions that you're talking about, the Assembly and the Senate, were completely disrupted because of, there were leaders that had been there for decades that no one ever thought would be taken down. And much of it was because of how staffers were treated, women were treated.
Yeah, it's a pattern of abusive behavior. The fact, his intimidating tactics, picking up the phone, to how he talks to female staffers, the verbal abuse now we're seeing left and right, and obviously the inappropriate touching, which he denies he's never done. All those things are a pattern of him abusing his power, position of power. And when the top person of the Albany culture normalizes the verbal and physical abuse to a woman, what kind of ripple effect does it have on the culture of Albany. And that I feel that's why it's so critical right now to hold him accountable. And I know that some of his people, loyalists that want to defend him, make this about partisan politics. That's always the pushback, right? Like, well, we didn't do anything to Donald Trump, and he's much better than Donald Trump. Like, one thing has nothing to do with another. Yes, Donald Trump is horrible. He should be held accountable. But we as Democrats, if we do not act now, we're even worse hypocrites than Republicans, because we were shouting to Republicans for months down in Washington, hold your guy accountable. This is, we try to set that moral high ground. But the moment that it happens in our own house, we just kind of try to shield the corruption and we try to shield the abusive behavior. It is not acceptable. And I think the younger progressive lawmakers fully understand that. And I'm confident that we can really seize this moment to transform the Democratic Party and transform places like Albany, where people don't feel like they'll be threatened and abused for doing their jobs.
The next step is there are investigations underway. Can you tell us what you know about them, how they proceed, the timeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the governor, he wants to prolong it as long as possible. He'll probably try to stall the attorney general's investigation and give himself as much time to curry as many favors in the budget or whatever he can do to realign more allies. I think that's the tactic, but I think so many lawmakers are just sick and tired because, and not just the lawmakers, the journalists, the press, the media who've also been abused. Imagine being a reporter in Albany and you're never get called on for a question for 8 months. You're supposed to be the Albany core, reporters. You just they never engage you because they don't want to answer tough questions. Like, imagine foiling for basic information over and over and over and getting stonewalled and them refusing to share information. They actually have an internal policy. They erase all their emails once a month. Everything is erased.
It's insane.
They have burner phones. They use burner phones inside the administration. It is not a transparent.
They learned after
Right.
Prococo, so
Right.
who's sitting in prison. Assemblymember Ron Kim, thank you so much for joining us, speaking up, telling us your story, sharing it, and hopefully we'll get to see you in person in post-COVID land very soon.
It's good to see you, Nomiki. Take care.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye.
All right, we will be right back with our great panel, Representative Chris Rabb from Pennsylvania and Arun Chaudhary. Right after this quick little break, we will see you on the flip. Stick around, guys. The music's not playing. Don't freak out. We're just producing a little different today. All right, welcome back. I'm manning the desk today, so please be patient with me, guys. This is a very new thing. I've got Kyle's help in the background. All right, we have Representative Chris Rabb here from Pennsylvania, from Philadelphia, and Arun Chaudhary live from Berlin. Thanks for joining us. We're doing a very special day today. It's called
what does manning the desk mean? What does that mean?
I'm womaning the desk. It means I am producing, sort of.
Oh,
Dorsey
like running the control stuff
helped in the beginning today, but he had a thing that he couldn't get away from. So we are doing it. I've done it for live events before, so it's not too painful, but I have to, it's muscle memory. And thank God I have Kyle here. So shout out to Kyle in the background, who's helping us out. All right, guys, this is our Cuomo day. We have a couple things we want to talk about Cuomo, and then we're going to pivot. I want to I'm sorry, this was supposed to be the little commercial break, but I don't know how to do that. So give me a second while I set up our lovely, oh, where did it go? Jesus Christ. This is the problem. Things move around. This is why you need a producer, guys. This is it. People wonder, you know, I see these streamers and like folks chill, but for whatever reason, it's not working. There we go. Exit full screen. So Andrew Cuomo is oh, goodness gracious. I'm sorry, guys. This is like way more difficult.
He's the nation's governor, right?
This is the governor of New York, right? Who has been
Can we
in
call
office.
him the embattled governor of New York yet? Are we there yet?
I think we were there 7 years ago. Like
Fair.
the guy had, okay, so just as a reminder to folks, we're about to play something which is classic Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo is very good at big picture gaslighting. That's like, if you're gonna, it should be like on his grave when he dies. Gaslighter in chief, because what he's so great at is saying he's the most progressive governor ever, and yet creating an IDC, which is 8 Democrats who caucus with Republicans, to block all progressive legislation. So he didn't have to veto progressive legislation. That was his whole shtick. So I want to play this because it's really just too beautiful, and I love it, and it should be my ringtone. If I can get this to work. Give me 1 second, guys. Here we go. Share zone. And thanks for your patience, everybody.
As New Yorkers, we are especially aware of issues of diversity. We're aware of issues of intolerance because we are 18 million people from countries all across the globe. We are probably the most diverse state on the globe. And it is the essence of who we are. And we have no tolerance for intolerance, period. And that's what we're going to stand up and say. As New Yorkers, we are especially...
So this is like classic Cuomo, right? You know, he had this other famous one where he talks about we are Jews, we are Muslims, we are
I thought
this.
You were play that one. That one's bananas.
That's the one I thought I had, but
I'm a
for
pregnant
whatever
woman
reason.
looking for an abortion or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I wish this was just humor. Oh, I have that one too. Let me play that one just so everybody can get their fix in, if that works for you. It's like we're streaming. This is like suddenly we're a Twitch stream. People say they want to see me stream. Well, this is what you're gonna get. Someone who
Live.
We'll do it live. We'll do it live. I appreciate you all for your patience on this. All right, let's play that one. This is just fun. We're now roasting Andrew Cuomo.
As a New Yorker, I am a Muslim. As a New Yorker, I am Jewish. As a New Yorker, I am black. I am gay. I am disabled. I am a woman seeking to control her health and her choices, because as a New Yorker, we are one community.
So let's just remind everybody why that's offensive. He started a group called the Women's Equality Party in
Oh God, yeah, this is important.
2000, when he ran against Zephyr Teachout, 2011.
Yeah, exactly.
You remember this, runs a New Yorker. And this was because he had a woman running against him who was endorsed by the WFP line, the Working Families Party, which is another line. In New York, you can have multiple lines if you get the signatures to get on the ballot. So he organized a group of women, all institutional Democrats, to start the Women's Equality Party, the WEP line, against the WFP line. So he had his name on the ballot more. It was, and also to be, a feminist. That's the take here. Right. So, all right, let's just start with Arun. You're from New York. What is your take? Like, what is it going to take for someone like him to be held accountable? Because he wins with landslides and is able to rebound, even though his entire circle has gone to jail.
Yes. No. Yes, and all of that, and these people know how to survive, etc. It feels like a moment. It feels like something's happened. You have people really speaking out. These women bravely speaking out, and also it's not one of those situations where it's like, but he's such a nice guy. Right. He's not such a nice guy, and then it's under that, it's like, but he's effective, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, and he's not effective. So like he has a lot of floors to fall through before he hits the pavement, and I think he's going to be at terminal velocity when he gets there. I think it's caught up with him. I really do.
You think it's caught up with him, Rabb? I mean, it's a guy who understands power. Really, I think he understands power more than anybody out there at this point. He knows how to use the levers of power. He managed his father's campaign for mayor. Like when he was young, he knew how to work the Democratic Party. He's failed, he's won, he's learned lessons. People like that, if you can get through a corruption scandal where your inner circle goes to jail, do you think this is going to stop him?
I don't honestly know, and I cannot be the expert on New York politics, but I can say that we can learn a lot as a nation dominated by corporate media in terms of the narratives that are created that bolster certain figures who are then able to leverage those platforms in order to gaslight. So I know so many people who are nowhere near New York who love Governor Cuomo because he stood up to Donald Trump and he says the right things. And he's not the first, and he certainly won't be the last elected official to do so in a pretty compelling way. But what is our responsibility as a society in terms of the civic literacy we know in order to hold everyone to account, irrespective of the news clips and the sound bites that make him look like the salvation for a particular party or for a nation? People like to step in the breach so quickly, and people want to say, oh, that person did masterfully in this way against someone I hate, therefore they should be the next president, or they should be the standard bearer, when we haven't done our due diligence and looked beyond the surface to say, let's look at his policies. And we're coming to that moment with regard to Biden, right? We look at all the things that Biden has done immediately to help eviscerate some of the worst aspects of the Trump administration. But then when we look closer at the things that he hasn't touched or he seeks to tweak in the most superficial ways, we have to understand that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can be incredibly critical of Donald Trump and his minions, while also being critical of anyone who goes against the very values they espoused during the campaign trail, and actually the things that they affirm that we like in the majority around racial equity. So I don't care how much a president talks about racial equity. I want to see it put into full force of law. And I don't care about the rhetorical flourishes and the changes of names. So when people say, I want to abolish ICE, I don't want to abolish ICE. I want to abolish weaponized, racialized immigration policy and mass deportation and detentions. I don't want to close detention centers. I don't want the existence of detention centers at all. Those are very different things, but we have to have the level of discernment to say, what is it that we should be looking for beyond the speeches and the press conferences?
Arun?
I'm implicating myself in this. This is the dark side of what was sort of fun and exciting about the YouTube era of politics, starting with Obama, where we saw behind the scenes and got to see what people were like, and we made characters out of our politicians, and then we made fans out of ourselves. And I think what Rabb is saying so perfectly is you shouldn't be a fan of a politician. You should, stick around and see what the food tastes like. It's just that simple. And I say that as someone who tries to make you a fan of any number of politicians for a living. But yeah,
You know, this is really we touched on this with Harry Siegel at the top. What's really disturbing me right now is there's a crisis, and I think both of you can speak to this from different perspectives. There's a crisis right now, obviously in media, and even in independent media, where we're all fighting the algorithms and the corporate structures, and but especially over the last 10 years, right? In terms of shame, Martin Luther King Jr. used to talk about using shame as a tool, but I feel as if the leader is powerful enough, and I say powerful meaning they have institutions who back them, they have folks who depend on them for budgets or access as journalists, they're able to protect themselves and move through a storm of shame. It's amazing to me looking back that someone like Chris Christie, which very real scandal, wasn't able to get through that. Yet Andrew Cuomo shut down the Moreland Commission, had the Buffalo Billion scandal, had the IDC, not to mention just his own personality, and how he treats people, and Joe Biden with in-your-face visuals of how he dealt with women and very credible allegations against him, not to mention so much else. That because they were protected, or the Clintons, best example, because they were able to move through it. And I worry, I don't know if elections are the only counter to a politician's reputation and I'm worried about the state of democracy now, when the mechanisms of holding people in power accountable only seem to apply when that person in power doesn't have power. Does that make sense?
It makes absolutely. It makes a lot of sense, and it's true. We can learn so much from how people are treated differently, right? There's so many different layers that we have to look at. And like the governor of Virginia, right? The blackface thing. He started, after that came out, everyone's saying, okay, who are all the white elected officials?
Yeah.
Who did, because his thing was, I was young, I didn't know what I was doing, I apologize, yada, yada. And then all these white folk are like, uh-oh, did I do that too? Did I do something equally offensive? And then they had to get on the apology parade and get on the right side of history. The challenge with that is they needed that Democratic governor in that moment in that state, right? There was a tenuous balance of power in Virginia. And so they're like, is it worth it to fall on the sword for the right reasons, but lose the political power to do the things that the majority of Virginians wanted? Right? Because potentially, if you remove someone and the power dynamic shifts to people who actually don't care about sexual assault or sexual harassment or issues of patriarchy or sexism or misogyny, then it's a Pyrrhic victory, right? So how do we unravel all the different ways that we address the underlying issue, which is if we don't have a real discussion about the complexities and nuances around everything, gender, sexual orientation, class, race, all the isms, all the things we're not supposed to talk about in polite conversation and over Thanksgiving dinner, but we actually put it right out there. And when I used to be on the board of Race Forward for 10 years, it was a leading racial justice think tank in North America. And we would always say, race first. We lead with race and immigration, race and gender, race and healthcare. We have to put the issue out in front and address it, because we always are addressing it, but we're not addressing it in good faith and explicitly. And when we do that, we're able to address some of the deeper issues that we're not just by simply checking off the political box and say, oh, this person did a bad thing, we got to remove them, or we got to keep them in office because it's going to hurt. We have to have deeper conversations. And then we have to ask ourselves, who are the leaders who can cultivate and curate those conversations in good faith? And that's what has to happen in between controversies. We can't just let the controversy die. We got to use that as a vehicle to have more difficult conversations and talk about the systems and policies that will prevent future indiscretions and diatribes.
And that's the organizational effort and the movement effort, which is really important because, even the movement sometimes just shoots missiles out in all sorts of directions, maybe not
Often.
with not with thinking them through or assessing them or having a strategy, et cetera. But I mean, Arun, like, this is why political spin exists, right?
I mean, I was going to say, yeah, as a practitioner, you have a different perspective on it a bit,
Yeah.
Sorry,
I mean,
you were
no, I'm just saying, I mean, back to the original question I asked, Rabb, if shame isn't working, it only works on people who don't have institutions who have their backs. I mean, you and I both know, all of us know that hit pieces go out against people all the time. And sometimes there's a little truth to it, no truth to it. And it's used as a weapon against folks. But, it's easy to knock folks out if they don't have a party behind them, or if they don't have institutions behind them, if they don't have power brokering or whatever it is. It's very hard to take out the Weinsteins. It's very hard to take out the Clinton. It's very hard to take out the Cuomos when there's just so much power that's intertwined in their existence, and so many favors and so many jobs and so much loyalty.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of inertia pushing against it, and that's why I think there's two ways it sticks to the powerful, and only two ways that scandal, controversy in any way sticks to the powerful. And I say this as somebody who seeks to use it from time to time, right? And that is if it speaks to a narrative about your weakness or your strength. So, let's take John Kerry as a random person who did have the power of the Democratic Party behind him, and as much institutional power as his ketchup money can buy, right? He is a rich guy.
His wife's money, just so folks know.
Yeah.
For the youngins out there, he married Teresa Heinz of the ketchup.
Who was actually fabulous. She was my favorite part of that whole race. She was always, saying stuff in French, and it was great.
Sorry, just like
but so like John, so the windsurfing works because John Kerry is this feckless rich guy. You know what I mean? Or to take him again, swift boating works because it's absolutely untrue, but it goes directly at his strength. It's like using an arrow to split a bullet or something, but it works. And I think you see this being kind of the only thing that takes these folks down. But when you're looking, I think part of the problem is also, here we are on the left looking in, and when we take somebody down, we're worried about being right. And when someone has less nefarious motives for it, they're not worried about that. And sometimes it's easier to arrest Al Capone on tax evasion, even though it's kind of crap, than it is to get him on racketeering. And just be satisfied with that. Like, just be satisfied and go home with that.
It's interesting you say that, because people keep saying, why is this scandal different for Cuomo? And I am of the belief that it's different because it emerged actually originally before Assemblymember Kim came out publicly. It emerged on the right. You had Janice Dean, who's like a wholesome former reporter at Fox, not ultra right, not Laura Ingraham, but like one of their more, palpable hosts who's no longer at Fox. And she had her mother and father-in-law died in one of these nursing homes. And she just kept beating the drum on it. And then Megyn Kelly picked it up, and then Fox News picked it up. But the reason why that's important is because Andrew Cuomo's power base is not on the left. It's on the right. That's who he answers to. And so suddenly it went into the New York Post, it went to the New York Daily News. And then the left, then Assemblymember Ron Kim was, as he said, he had this conversation. They had this conversation with Melissa DeRosa in August, his chief aide. So suddenly there was a space where the left and the right closed in on him. And then Lindsey Boylan's comments. So it's like, now that he's weak and people are paying attention, we can go forward with the allegations that, she's been holding inside for a long time. Yeah. I just think that might be the dynamic is that the right, but it wasn't like, it was based in something, which is interesting because usually the attacks on the right are not based in anything.
And it's not fair, right? He's behaving badly. He's been a bad governor, whether it's lying about fracking, there's any number of reasons why he's not an acceptable governor. So it may not be fair that this sort of strange combinations of things is what's going to take him down. But if that's the thing that's going to take him down, I think it's okay.
That's the point, the Al Capone thing. I'm not convinced it's going to take him down. But Rabb, you've got a lot of corruption in your state. I mean, what takes down your leaders?
I was just thinking about how swiftly my Republican colleagues asked for their their members to resign. I have a colleague I used to work with who was accused of drugging and raping women. Another colleague who stepped down because he was stalking a fellow member and brandished a weapon. They asked their members to leave, and it's a power dynamic. It's a power dynamic because they love their Trump and they defended everything he did, no matter how vile. But when it was something they were able to control and replace a bad Republican with a new one who wasn't going to give them bad press, it was very easy for them
trying to keep that brand clean.
Yeah. They're replaceable. At the end of the day, they're about power. And they were able to let their people go. Democrats, they held on longer. I have a colleague who served for 42 years in the House, and he had very credible allegations against him around sexual predation. And there's only a few of us who asked for him to resign on the D side. And, right is right. But we have to be, I've mentioned this before, there's something called symptom chasing, right? You can go after the symptom, but the problem is much deeper and it's institutional. How do we disconnect political power with bullying and oppressive and autocratic practices and behaviors and attitudes? That requires as much time as who we should vote for, because the election seasons are a lot shorter than what it takes for us to govern. And we need to learn how to co-govern and to hold people accountable. So I don't need my constituents to think of me as a friend. I need them to see me as an effective and honest and hardworking public servant. And I let them know how they can hold me accountable in terms of my ethics, my policies, my staff, my provision of constituent services, my speech, my voting record, my attendance record. All of those things are legitimate. Whether they like my personality or my personal stuff, how telegenic I might be, that stuff is so secondary or tertiary. It may help me be a better public servant, but they're not proxies for what elected officials must do. And if we don't know how to hold folks accountable, because I don't think most people know how to hold governors accountable other than saying, well, elections have consequences. There are things we can do long before that. And we see that in most other countries. It could be the most minor thing. And I know Arun can talk about this. They'll go to the streets in no time. And that's something that we are only now kind of flexing our muscle around since, Occupy, right?
Yeah.
And we see what happens on the right, but now those of us progressives are saying there are other ways for us to assert ourselves beyond just running for office or thinking solely in campaign mode.
Right. Arun?
I have nothing to add to that. Voting by other means. That is absolutely right. We just see this over and over again. And I think it was really interesting sort of when you were talking about how we the center left thinks of their folks as being sort of indispensable. I remember the Al Franken arguments, like we really do think of these folks as being indispensable. And it's just like, nah, there's plenty of other people who are ready to take up this cause. That's what it means to be in a movement. Like
if they're in safe seats,
so precious about these personalities.
Right. If they're in safe seats, key thing. The Katie Hill thing was interesting to me because she, they just won that seat when she basically, let's be clear, she was asked to step down, and she stepped down, and now we lost that seat, right? That's a Republican seat now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what does winning look like when people ask someone to step down, right? So is winning saying we've removed the problem or we've removed the symptom? And normally we're talking about removing the symptom. It doesn't change anything. I worked in the US Senate in my 20s. I saw some awful
sure
behavior.
You did. Still there.
Strom Thurmond, Jesse Helms, Ted Kennedy, Bob Packwood.
Oh my
goodness, on and on. It was a mess, right? And that's the norm in all institutions. And this is me as a hetero cis man saying this. like every woman knows how patriarchal most of these institutions are. Like, you don't have to go far to find them. But what are we doing to address these things systemically? Because we give ourselves a pass if we say, oh, we got the bad guy. And that was the problem with the Trump narrative. Trump was created by generations of Republican and conservative policies and institutions, even in spite of themselves, right? And so getting rid of Trump is not getting rid of the problem. And when you look at things like, we're talking a lot about immigration reform now, Biden's response is, we're getting rid of the worst elements of what Trump did regarding immigration. But he's not talking about getting rid of the vestiges of the 8 years of the Obama administration as it relates to mass deportation and detentions, or acknowledging that its roots was in a bill that President Clinton signed into law, I think in '96, that basically racialized and weaponized immigration against, immigrants of color. Like, that is the origin, and every president is indicted until they affirmatively say, we're going in a different direction, because systemically, this is deeply problematic. And Biden is not likely to be the president to do that. And I think that's a problem.
Arun, final word. Are we in a place where it's not just that you can't shame lawmakers, but to the same extent, but can we move them? I mean, coming out of the Trump administration and seeing millions of people hit the streets multiple times and nothing changing, I feel like that is the lesson for the Biden administration. The first 100 days, he's barely listening to folks, egregiously so. I mean, $2,000 checks, $1,600 checks, $1,400 checks, whatever, $15 minimum wage. I mean, it's to me, I feel like it's like a Bolshevik moment. You know what I mean? Like, they kind of know what's going on outside. They kind of do, but like, they still feel safe. No?
Well, I think just like the Bolsheviks were, stole the word majority for their minority party, which of course is just an amazing move. I think we're seeing sort of we actually talked about it on the show when you were gone, Nomi, so you will know this.
I watched it.
Yeah.
I did my homework.
And then every politician responds to, an industrial applause complex. Everybody wants to be praised, and the people who praise you often are the people who from your community. So it's great, their constituents, But this, with social media and with factionalism, has shrunk down. And while I think you used to shoot for sort of a 40% kind of range that you would be taking in, and now it's this strict sort of 20%. And 20% of people are crazy and believe anything, and you can just put like them in. So the people who are around Biden, who are applauding both the bombing of Syria and the maybe half measures taken on kids, and then also his, frankly, refreshing support for unions and organizing all at the same time in that crazy mixture, are just that part of the Democratic field that straddles that line exactly, from neoliberal foreign policy to, I guess unions are probably okay. Right to work seems bad, but I don't know much more about that.
That's exactly. There's limitations on that, because
there's 20% there, and that's who's applauding for him now, and that's who he's dancing for.
Well said. Final word, Rep. Rabb.
It all comes back to the same thing for me. We are only as powerful as we are knowledgeable, and we are mobilized in a collective manner. And we can't expect that from government. We can't expect that from Wall Street, from corporate media. We have to organize, as is our tradition for generations and centuries, to make sure that we are up on what's going on, and that we inform each other, and we understand that we are swimming in a fishbowl, and there's something outside of that fishbowl. We need to acknowledge that fishbowl and realize that there is a way to jump out of it toward mass liberation. But it requires effort, it requires coordination, and it requires courage, because when particularly those of us on the left speak up, we are the ones who get in the most trouble. The First Amendment does not apply to us. The carceral system is made for us. Right. And we have to be aware of that too. There are certainly risks in doing it, but I can say that I would not be where I am, either an elected official or in life, if it were not for those who were courageous, who allowed for the progress of so many people beyond just myself.
Arun Chaudhary, Rep Rabb, thank you for joining us. Love Thursdays. Always a pleasure. And I got to do some shout outs. Thank you to everybody for dealing with my production today. I know I'm it's a lot. So we are going to do our super chat shout outs tomorrow, I promise, for Fem Friday. But I want to thank Midi Docs and Mario for working the algorithms as usual, and our moderators on YouTube, Bob C, Choke in the Orb, and Chuck Diesel, and Dorian Sapiens, A Difficult Truth, Nightbot, Our Means, Nug Wrangler, all on Twitch for keeping our chat room troll free. Special thanks to Kyle. Kyle has been helping us out. Very appreciative. I know I gotta learn some stuff still, technically. Sending our love to Dorsey, who was away today, and grateful to him for helping us start off the show. And I know Harvey K's in there in the chat. I think he's on Twitch today. I saw a text just before I was going in about Twitch. So thank you all. Great show. Glad you were here to talk about Cuomo, and to everybody who has stepped out and spoken out against Cuomo over the years. It's not an easy task. I have also felt the wrath of Cuomo in ways that I probably don't want to talk about right now, but someday I will just leave it there. Take care, everybody. Be well and stay